Hello everybody, and welcome to an impressions video on the Elder Scrolls Online. If you've been with my channel for a while, you know that I do touch upon AAA releases every now and again, especially when they are one of my favorite genres. MMOs is something that I kind of hold near and dear to my heart because I've been playing them for so many years. Unfortunately, MMOs have kind of fallen off of my radar in the past few years because I really don't have the time to be putting into them, and B, I don't really have the lust for them like I used to because a lot of them are doing the same thing over and over and over again, and unfortunately, that's caused me to kind of step away from the genre. And if you have been around for a while, you'll know that I did cover Guild Wars 2 when it first came out, and I gave my first impressions on that, and I covered Final Fantasy XIV and gave my first impressions on that. So I felt it, you know, my duty to cover the Elder Scrolls Online. I did stream it over the weekend. They did lift the NDA, so I was able to stream it. People are allowed to give their opinions on it, and that's what this is going to be. So if you are interested in Elder Scrolls Online, here are my opinions on the game, the gameplay, and so on. So the first thing I should mention about the Elder Scrolls Online is that I walked in with very low expectations of the game. I wasn't expecting much out of it. I didn't expect it to blow my socks off. I didn't expect it to change the game at all as far as MMOs are concerned. And what I was met with was exactly what I was expecting, which is not high praise. I was met with a functional, if overly traditional, MMORPG. And that was incredibly disappointing. If this game did not have the Elder Scrolls title on it, it would be overlooked and forgotten long ago. The only reason this particular game is being kept in the eyes of many is because of the name that's being slapped on it. Now, it's important to note that Bethesda is not developing this game. This is ZeniMax Online, a totally separate studio from Bethesda, while Bethesda works on other proper single-player games. And you know, when I went into this game, I expected, like I said, not much. And I was thinking a lot about why this game in particular disappoints me compared to when I looked at Final Fantasy XIV, and Final Fantasy XIV blew my socks out of the water for a little while. I was very enamored with that game, when in reality, Final Fantasy XIV didn't do anything different. It didn't change the game at all. And, you know, the Elder Scrolls Online is very similar in that it doesn't change the gameplay, even remotely, very, very remotely. We'll talk about gameplay mechanics shortly. But I thought about it for a couple days, and I even played a little bit more last night on stream, and I was talking to Dean about it, and I think I've come to the decision that the reason I was more forgiving with Final Fantasy Online, the reason I enjoyed Final Fantasy Online even for the short couple months that I actually played it until it sunk in that it didn't do much outside of what World of Warcraft was doing, was because when you play a game called Final Fantasy, you expect a single player, kind of linear JRPG with a good story. Typically, I mean, let's not talk about the more recent ones. I'm just saying, when you think of Final Fantasy, that's what you think of. So when Final Fantasy goes into the MMO space, you don't really have that much to compare it to. You have Final Fantasy XI, but that came before World of Warcraft, and that was before the precedent. So when you go and you see Final Fantasy XIV entering the MMO space, and they're talking about changing things and bringing aspects of Final Fantasy XI and mixing it with more traditional MMO stuff, you don't really have this basis to compare it to. Final Fantasy, in general, is not that big of an open world. Game. So when it takes a step into an open world genre, everything it does, as long as it does it competently and they do some fun things with it, it's gonna be fun. You don't expect much. But when you go with the Elder Scrolls, you know, you take that particular genre and you step forward and you say, I'm gonna make an MMORPG out of this. You already have one of the most well-known, critically acclaimed, best-selling open-world games in existence. When you bring that formula and try and make it an MMO, you have a hell of an uphill battle ahead of you. And in order to bring that Elder Scrolls feeling, because when people play Elder Scrolls games, they expect a very particular immersive game, and you change it and make concessions and strip away of what makes the Elder Scrolls and fun, you're left with nothing but disappointment. one of the fun things to do in the Elder Scrolls is to wander around the world and stumble across random dungeons that might not even have a quest with it. You can just explore it and get treasure and fight monsters and just discover these hidden things around the world that tell their own story. And there is no leveling like traditional, MMO leveling. There's no, other players to contend with loot with. There's no like raids or instances that you have to meet a certain level requirement or certain gear to do well. You can just wander and enjoy the game. And when you make that and take that away, and you make the Elder Scrolls an MMORPG, you're removing what makes the Elder Scrolls so fun. That immersive world that you can explore and discover and loot and, just find random things and enjoy that. And you're replacing it with questing, quest hubs, leveling, gear, skills, all the typical MMO tropes, and that takes a lot of the magic away. Because now I'm wandering the world and I'm seeing quests, and if I'm not in a dungeon and I go, or if I find this little area that has like monsters in it and I think to myself, well, I don't have a quest for this, I'm probably gonna have to come back and fight these guys with the quest anyway. That takes away of, wow, I found this camp of monsters, I killed them and I got loot. Because that's what the Elder Scrolls is, not, I don't have the quest for this, let me go see if there's a quest for it. And that's what the Elder Scrolls is. And granted, they do try and implement this exploration, and there are a couple cool things that they do that I like, where there are a couple, and I mean a couple, not a bunch, of dungeons per zone that you can just stumble across, and there are quests on the inside of those dungeons. But it is not as open as the Elder Scrolls is. You walk into Daggerfall, the first major city of the Alliance that I chose, and all around you are just little frickin' quest icons. Like, this guy has a quest, and this guy has a quest, and this guy has a quest, and this guy has a quest. And the worst part about it is, it does everything well enough. Everything works technically fine. Everything plays well. There was very little lag in the beta that I played. There was very little problems in the beta that I played. It's actually very beautiful to look at. I think the game is gorgeous to look at. And animations are pretty good, and the combat spells look really nice. Everything works well for an MMO. But it does not work well for the Elder Scrolls Online. Especially a game that's charging you $60 plus $15 a month, plus, from what I'm told, a cash shop at launch. If this game was free to play, I'd say I can't wait for this game. If this game was free to play like Guild Wars, it would elevate it to a point where I would be jumping all over it. But because it's asking me for $60 plus $15 a month plus a cash shop, and they're locking away an entire race behind a pre-order paywall, I can't. I just can't get excited for it. Why do I care? I don't care. I don't care. And I shouldn't care. It's just boring. It's just more of the same, and that sucks. That really, really does. So let's talk gameplay. As you've been seeing in the background, I've been fighting and wandering around and doing some quests and maybe showing a little bit of the early story. Combat is functional. It's one of the more fun combats I've had in the game. It's not your typical run up to things, click, and let your guy do animations while you press 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. It's more Guild Wars in that it's action-oriented. There's dodging and rolling. You right-click to block. You left-click to swing your sword. You can go into first-person mode and you can attack things. It works really well. It feels engaging. It's exciting for the most part. But it's been done by Guild Wars, and I think Guild Wars actually does it a little bit better, in my opinion. I feel like what the Elder Scrolls tries to do is take the Guild Wars style of combat and try and mix it with Elder Scrolls combat. And it works. It's definitely more akin to Guild Wars than any other MMO. I just think Guild Wars is a little bit more fun. I have a lot more fun with the Guild Wars combat style than I did with this one. But that's not to say it isn't fun. There's some cool things you can do, like being able to, as a wizard, cast a spell, hold up your shield and shield bash him, actively shield bash him to interrupt his spells. There's some cool looking stuff as far as like using a chain to pull an enemy forward. I really do like that a lot too. It's a lot of fun. It looks good and it plays well. One of the cooler things is leveling up as well. I do like the way the leveling system works. The more you use something, the higher the skill gets. It's very Elder Scrolls in that way. It translates pretty well too. I like that a lot. One of the cooler things about leveling is the way the skills level up. So when you level up, you get to put one attribute point into health, stamina, or magicka, various Elder Scrolls, and the more you put into it, the more you get. So obviously, the more you put into magicka, the more your mana bar goes up. Stamina bar, health bar. As far as I know, it depends on the way you want to play it, but there's obviously, if I'm going to play as a tank, I'm going to put it all into health. If I'm going to play as like a roguish character, I'm going to put it all into stamina, wizard, all magicka. It's, there's no real decision there. You kind of just do that way. Skills, on the other hand, works kind of cool. So when you start, you pick a class, and that class comes with 3 skill trees, of which you can pick skills to put skill points into. And then you have weapon skills so you can put it into, and you can pick up and play with any weapon, a lot like Elder Scrolls works. There's racial skills you can put it into, armor skills you can put it into. There's a lot of customization as far as skills are concerned. My only concern there is that I do feel like there's going to be best builds. Unlike the Elder Scrolls, there's not infinite really levels or anything, or infinite skill points you can do. You are going to hit a max at level 10, at level 50, and I think there's 10 veteran levels after that, I'm told, which is more specialization. But with MMOs comes the whole, this is the best tank build, this is the best DPS build. There's no real fluctuation there. And a lot of MMOs do try and say, hey, you can build your character any way you want, don't worry about it. Then when that's really not true, and I feel that Elder Scrolls is going to fall victim to that as well. There's a lot of customization, but there's very clearly already best skills to pick if you're going to be playing a tank, or best skills to pick if you're going to be playing DPS. And if you don't pick those skills, you're not going to be as effective as a tank or a DPS or a wizard. Now keep in mind, this is all coming from me playing about 5 or 6 hours of the game over the weekend and just kind of feeling for the game as best I can. But one of the cooler things about the skills is that each skill, at least as far as I can tell, as far as class skills go, at the very least, morphs over use. So my particular example I have is my chain. So I used my chain. I shoot a chain out and I yank an enemy forward and I get to, drag him to me. Once it reaches max level, because over time you get better and better with it and it does more and more damage and it skills up. Once it reaches max skill point, you can do something called morph it, which costs 1 skill point. And you click on it, and you can use a skill point to morph it into one of 2 new abilities. A chain that has a much longer reach, or a chain that does much more damage. And it does have a slightly different graphical effect, and each one's going to be useful in its own way. For instance, my armor, you can see spikes on my back right now. The armor can turn into armor that gives me more armor, or armor that does AoE damage after I skill it up all the way. Now, obviously, if you're going tank, you're going to want the one that gives you more armor, and it's going to have a cooler graphical effect, and so on and so forth. I like that a lot. It actually kind of reminds me very little of EverQuest 2, where EverQuest 2 had this prestige class system, which I thought was fucking awesome back in the day. Being able to specialize and morph your skills to your liking, I think, is a really cool feature. Not game-breaking, it's not game-changing, and it's not brand new, but it's cool enough where I figured it was worth a mention. I think it was really nice. I enjoyed it. The other thing that I enjoy about the game is that it looks nice. Again, we're in the very first open zone. Yeah, and it was very beautiful, very green, bright, and blue. It looks gorgeous. The enemies look good. A lot of the animations look good. I have to give it, you can tell that this is a AAA game. It works really well as far as aesthetics concerned. It's beautiful to look at, and it's fun to just kind of stare. The main city is big and vibrant, and there's a lot to explore, and there's a ton of cool features involved. And as far as player diversity, I don't notice one, at least in the beta, I didn't notice one class over another, which is surprising. Usually when I play an MMO, especially in the early days, you see way more wizards than you see anything else. So you see way more rogues than you see anything else. And in this particular beta, and there were a lot of players, I didn't notice one more class over another. It's something I kind of went out of my way to look for, to be honest, which is kind of weird. I'm sure there is one favorite class, but immediately upon looking, there was a very good variation of players, which is fun. I like that. And the reason I personally like that is because I don't like to play, I'm really weird like this. I don't like to play a class that's being overplayed. If there's one class that's being completely overpowered and overplayed, I like to avoid it at all costs. It's, and I just like to play, and typically I like to play tanks anyway. Not a lot of people like to play tanks, but that's just one of the reasons I started playing a tank. Really weird, I know. The questing in the game is fucking status quo. You go to a quest giver, you get a quest, you go do it. It's a lot of go kill this, go collect this. A lot of fetch quests, a lot of killing quests. They try and hide the fact that that's what it is. For instance, right now I'm following this Firefly on screen. But what this Firefly is doing is leading me to things to pick up, and I have to go get it, and then when I pick it up, I have to fight enemies. It's all very, very samey, which is unfortunate. One of the other things that the game does is... whoops, did I just knock my table? Oh, I did. Okay. Gotcha. Whoops. I didn't know what that noise was. What was I saying? Quest-wise, another thing that the game does, and does a lot of, is, which I think is kind of cool, is that the quest givers aren't always static. You can be wandering around, and all of a sudden this person will come running up to you telling you as a quest. It's cool. I like it because it makes you kind of immersed in the world. I'm running around this open field, and all of a sudden this guy runs up to me and says, I have a quest. Now, you can ignore him altogether, and if you and just go about doing your thing, but if you do ignore him, you will see him come up to you time and time again every 5 or 10 minutes or so. There was one particular one I avoided back in the early tutorial island that I constantly ignored because the quest was broken at the time. And I would constantly see him popping up. I'd be running through a mountain pass, and he'd show up and be like, I need your help. And I'd just walk by him and be like, I'm sorry, I don't have your time. And then I'd be walking into the middle of an open field, and all of a sudden he'd be like, I need your help. So, as cool as it is to have these guys kind of wandering up to you, if you're ignoring them or whatever, they're going to constantly barrage you, and that sense of immersion kind of disappears after you see him for like the 5th time. And he's like, hey, I need your help. You need to help me with this thing. Cool idea. I think it would work. I think it works well, but if you do choose to ignore and wander and explore on your own, then you're not gonna do, that sense of immersion is gonna disappear. Now you're gonna see me in the screen right now. I'm actually wandering into one of the 2 dungeons in the early area that you can just stumble across. There are quests down there to kind of give you a reason to go there, but that's what that's for. So that's kind of cool, quest-wise. I did enjoy that. That was neat. I do think it needs to be tweaked a little bit, though. Instead of having him running up to you every 5 minutes, maybe make it every 15, so it doesn't feel like he's just nagging you to constantly do the same thing over and over and over again. I didn't really get to touch upon PvP, unfortunately. I hear it's kind of cool. I never got into it, so I can't really give an opinion on that. When I play these games, I'm much more of a PvE kind of guy anyway. I like dungeons, I like working with players, and I like cooperating with players. Now, this brings up a worry I have with the game because of how it's designed. Now, Guild Wars 2 did something really cool, where it brought about party play without forcing party play. And the way they did that is with these world quests, right? You would wander the world, you would stumble across these quests, and all these players would get together and help each other completing this quest. And it was fucking cool. I thought it was really, really awesome. So you could play that solo style of play that you can enjoy and still get that party experience and feel like you're part of this world of heroes, which is what it was all about. Elder Scrolls, at least for the few hours that I played, it doesn't have that. In fact, the tutorial island has zero need to play with a party at all. There is not one instance. I played the entire time I actually played by myself. In fact, this dungeon that I'm going through, you see me kind of wandering around and exploring it, is actually marred by the fact that these random players are in here because they're just destroying all the enemies altogether. These world dungeons that you kind of stumble across and can explore are not instanced to you or to your party, which I think is a huge mistake. Because if I'm going in here by myself, I'd like to enjoy it by myself, I guess, in a weird way. But there should also be the option to queue up and maybe play with people. And it's a quick dungeon. It took me maybe 5 or 10 minutes. But if you're playing with a friend, I want to be able to go in there with my friend and not have the entire dungeon destroyed by this party that's in here before me. It sucks that these people were in here and just destroying everything before I had a chance. I didn't have a chance to fight these things. I didn't have a chance to feel like I was part of this dungeon that I didn't discover it on my own. In fact, I feel like this dungeon that I discovered out in the wilderness had been discovered 17 times over, and that these people are just kind of running through it because, hey, we've done this before. It was also very small, but hey, it's an early area. It's a newbie area. I'm not really worried about the size of it that much. But I'd love these to be instanced to the player or to the party. Having it open to the general public diminishes the feel of discovery and immersion, period. I don't like that at all. I think it needs to be changed massively. So that's another kind of complaint I have about the game. Now, one of the big bonuses I have about the game, one of the things I do like a lot, is the crafting system. And this will be the final thing I really talk about before I kind of give my final opinion. Now, the crafting system in the game is probably the sleekest, coolest crafting system I've seen in any game, maybe barring Final Fantasy XIV, but it's very difficult to compare to Final Fantasy XIV because FF14 made it a whole class on its own and made it a whole profession and a whole leveling system on its own. But for a game that doesn't focus on crafting as a leveling class, something you can get to level 50 with, the crafting in this game is cool as hell. So the way it works is very simple. You go to a blacksmith or whatever, or a iron, what do you call it? Whatever, you go to a blacksmithing station, I can't think of it, anvil, that's what it is, for me personally, if you're going to make weapons or armor. And you're presented with, you have to choose if you want to make a weapon or armor, and you're presented with the top row, which is a list of weapons you want to make first, and then you can choose what weapon you want to make. And then you can scroll through it, and of course you need to know it. Then you're presented with the option to, where'd it go? There it is. Then you're presented with the option of what material you want to use, which is very important if you're gonna, because what material you use will actually determine a lot of its stats. So for instance, I only have iron early on at this level, so I choose how much iron I want to use to make a sword. Now, the amount of iron I use will affect how powerful it is. So if I use 5 iron here, it looks like, what I'm looking at might not be perfectly synced up. So if I use 5 iron, it'll make it a level 6 sword, giving it a value of like 11 and a damage of 16. The less iron I use, the lower the level requirement, and the lower the damage it does. The more iron I use, the higher and better it ends up being. Then, after I choose how much iron and what material I want to use, I then choose the style. Now, as an orc, I only know the orcish style, and it requires a particular gem that you can buy from vendors around. And it just gives it a stylized look. And then finally, at the very last thing you want to choose is a trait. Now, this early on, I didn't have the ability to put traits on, but I did some research and looked at it. And what you can do is put a particular gem after you've researched it. Put a particular gem as part of the armor or part of the weapon, and you give it a trait. So you can kind of customize it. For instance, for armor, there's a couple of armors I could give a 2% boost to my stamina, or I could give extra spell resistance or extra speed when running. All this gives a level of uniqueness and customization you don't particularly see that much in crafting systems. Again, maybe barring Final Fantasy XIV, which does something kind of like this and makes it a lot of fun. And I like this a lot because it allows you to make very particular armors that you can maybe sell. So maybe you can make a particular armor or a weapon that somebody else in the game cannot make, and because of that, you can now sell it for money. You can kind of work the market in that way. Now, you might be wondering, well, how do I get iron? Well, around the world, you can get iron and mine this iron, and then you can come over here and go to the extraction tab and make that raw iron into iron bars. Very quick, very easy. Other ways you could do it is you can break down old pieces of armor and get some iron bars out of it as well. There's also research available, where you can research certain traits. It costs money and time, but it's really cool. And there's also improvements, where you can take a piece of your armor or your weapon and put in some more iron, and if you know a particular new buff from doing some research, you can improve the weapon or improve the armor with cool bonuses by doing improvements, which is cool. This is probably my favorite part of the game, is the crafting. The crafting works super well, and I think it looks really cool. It's smooth, it's sleek, and it's a lot of fun, which is saying something, because games like World of Warcraft, for instance, I think crafting is boring. It's something you kind of have to do in order to get some of the best gear in the game, but this is fun. This is a game I actually enjoyed crafting a lot with. And another cool thing about crafting is that throughout the world, if you do exploration, there are special anvils that you can find hidden away that give certain bonuses to your armor if you craft the armor on that anvil. So there is incentive to go and explore. Unfortunately, the world's not nearly as rich as like a single-player Elder Scrolls. And you know, out of everything, that's about it. I'm gonna leave my impressions here. I mean, it's been about 25 minutes, and I'm gonna leave you with my final thoughts. The best and most apt way to describe the Elder Scrolls Online is probably the most damning thing you can say about any MMO ever. It is functionally mediocre. It does nothing phenomenal. It does nothing exciting. It does nothing new. Everything it does has been done before, and to some degrees better in other MMOs. But the way it does it, it works. It's not broken. It functions. If it wasn't the Elder Scrolls, this game would have been forgotten long ago. If it was free to play, I would recommend this thing in a heartbeat because, hey, it does what a lot of AAA MMOs do, and it does it well enough, but not well enough to say, hey, here's $15 a month. Go play Guild Wars 2, I'd say. It may not have the best single-player experience or questing experience or, dungeon and raiding experience, but, hey, it's free, and you'll have a lot more fun playing something for free than you would pay for $15 a month. I would say wait to see what EverQuest Next is going to bring, and maybe wait to see Warlords of Draenor if you're looking for subscription-based. But the Elder Scrolls Online is definitely not worth the pre-order, the $15 a month, or the cash shop. It is incredibly mediocre, and that pains me to say it because I feel like if they had tried harder to bring in more Elder Scrolls-y things and put them in an MMO format, they might have done a lot more with the game, and it could have been a lot more fun. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope this was helpful and you enjoyed it. I'm curious if you guys have played it, what your thoughts on the game are. Make sure you post the comments below, and I will see all of you guys next time. Bye-bye.